think International Women's Day means a lot. I think especially if we look at the past 2 years, right, what it has been for women. There's a lot of progress that has been done. But I think, before I start, I think I want to say that to start with, I'm very, very privileged to be part of Go-To Group, which is an organization that obviously cares so much and is very committed to diversity and inclusion. And this obviously stems from our ethos as Gojek is a founding company, Tokopedia is a founding company, and we're really committed in that. But what does International Women's Day mean for me? I think it is a day where it is much needed for women to not necessarily shine, but it actually should be the day where we inspire other women, right? And it's a time that actually we can showcase the achievements of women around the world, and with that, right, inspire other women to rise. That's one thing. Second, I also believe that it is a day that should be taken as a way or where we get support not only from our female colleagues but also from males around the world, right? I think often when we talk about the success of women is not necessarily is supported by other women, but it's also supported by women and men that makes things happen, right? Because fundamentally we want to make these major changes. It requires a systemic change in the society as well, and that for sure requires a lot of the support from our male counterparts as well. So I think that's what it means for me.
Wonderful, and I agree very much with you that in the end it's something that men and women have to do both, and I believe that once women can take on their equal share, their equal role, it also creates space for men to do things differently and to pay attention to things that perhaps right now, given their role and position, they have less time for instance, taking care of children, household chores. So in the end, I think we really need one another to establish this change. Maybe since you also mentioned this event is also very much about showcasing women leaders in Indonesia, and we consider you an important example in that regard. Can you tell us a little bit more how you came to be in the position where you are right now in Go-To, and what your specific mandate is? Does it make a difference that you are a women leader? What would be your comments on those questions?
Well, I first begin my journey with Gojek about 7 years ago. I was the first female executive to sit on the senior leadership team. Obviously, when we were starting out, it was a very interesting dynamic, right? Especially being surrounded by men, and it's people often ask me, how do you deal with that, being the only female, right? Do you feel that you are singled out, or there's certain things that you cannot participate in? And the answer to that is yes. And I realized that they obviously do not mean to do that on purpose, right? But I think as time has gone by, that awareness of diversity and inclusion, that awareness of things, especially when we're talking about roles, right, it needs to really be considered. So I started off my career in Gojek as the first female executive, but obviously, like I said before, as part of the Go-To Group, Gojek also started off with a very strong ethos of diversity and inclusion, and we quickly really wanted to add on more female onto our leadership team, and today obviously we have so many amazing leaders, female, that are part of our team, who's heading our PR team, who's heading our GoFood entire business, who's heading our government relation, and and especially on the tech sector as well. We have a lot of, like, for example, our senior PMs who are female, and they keep on inspiring more women, right, to participate and be more active in the STEM industry. But having said that, obviously it is still no secret that we're still a long way to go in achieving gender parity, especially in the tech space, right? I think a survey that was done in 2020, I think it was a BCG study. It says that approximately there's only 35% of the tech industry workforce in Indonesia is represented by women. And if my understanding correctly, I think if we look across the globe, still is still way below 50%, right?
Right. Yeah.
So that is part of our internal target as well. We really want to raise, women participation, especially in the STEM industry, to go above that 35% mark. And obviously we realize one of the biggest challenge is in this is that, yeah, I think if we're talking about it, cultural barriers, right, in which you mentioned about juggling roles within lives and livelihoods. This has been probably the biggest barrier, and which the pandemic probably has set back, right? You see that with work from home, there was all this interesting conversation if work from home actually can help women advance their career, or actually it actually pushes women to be working longer hours, right? And I think now that we're 2 years into that, we see that happening, right, with women having to take more of that role of being sort of the how do you call it, really being, sort of like overseeing the family's well-being while still taking on their roles at work. And obviously we see that a lot of big organization starting to realize this, and they have developed policies and to help more women adjust to this. And at GoTo itself, we have our policy and practices that support more gender, especially in the female, right, in ensuring that they can actually thrive in the workplace, especially during the pandemic, right? And so 7 years in the GoTo group. The first 6 years I spent it as the chief human resource officer role, helping Gojek grew from 0 to 8,000 employees, helping bringing DEI as one of the key areas of focus as well. And now, I am the chairperson for the GoTo Foundation, Yayasan Anak Bangsa Bisa. And, as part of my role here, diversity and inclusion is also one of the key aspects that we look into, right? We realize that, as I mentioned before, building a sustainable future means that we need to design with system change in mind. And in that case, all parties should be involved in supporting to create more women change makers, more women that can be showcased, right, to be role models for other women's, and that these champion can actually help push for policy, national action plan change, to definitely break the barriers for entries, make it in employment opportunities, or even to enable women in the workplace in general.
Thank you very much. Very clear answer. It's clear that for your organization, this is very important, and you have a particular role in making this happen within your organization. Can you elaborate a little bit more about what you do at GoTo to take away these obstacles for women to shine and to take on their role and to not be pushed back within more traditional roles, so to speak? Can you give us a bit more flavor as to what that means in day-to-day work environment?
Sure. I think, even if we look at it from our entire ecosystem, if we look at our internal ecosystem, right, within the GoTo group, we've created, for example, employee resource group, which is a employee-led voluntary program, in which that consists of more or less about 250 Go troops, both men and women, that are focused in supporting and unlocking the skills and leadership of potential women within the GoTo ecosystem through mentorship, collaborations, discussions. As I mentioned before, we also have what we call the DEI Council that is looking for men that are looking for men and women that will be champions within their own work streams, right? To ensure that, one, for example, we look at the gender parity balance within the team, ensuring that, for example, even from a recruitment process, right? From a recruitment process, we have enough female candidates that enter into our pipeline. Ensuring that the interview questions, does not provoke any biases towards men and women. Or even, we even go to the extent, like, if in posting job description, participant rather than a female participant, right? So it's the little nuances like that we do. From, I guess that would be going into the nitty-gritty detail, but we start looking into those major different components, because we realize that if you want to make a change, it has to be fundamental changes that are subtle, that probably all of us normally take it for granted, like it's every day. But those subtle changes can actually make the most impact in making differentiation. So that's just from our ecosystem. We also have our Women in Tech community. We have our Star Summit Women community conferences. So we do try to promote, again, like I said, having these women as role models is extremely important. And another thing that we notice is having role models that feels attainable to you, right? Like, sometimes if we say, like, okay, Sri Mulyani is a great role model for all the female in Indonesia, right? But then, like, if I'm sitting in some rural area, for me to aspire to become Sri Mulyani, I don't even know how to begin, right? And try to bring that definition of role model down and making it closer and more attainable is actually, we find it as a way to inspire more women even further, right? And I think we see that, especially, for example, in Yayasan Anak Bangsa Bisa and YBB's program, that is clearly demonstrated. We just did a program which is in STEM called Generasi Gigi, in which that we really focus on creating more tech talent in the back end, front end, and data analytics. Last year we did our pilot program. This year we are doing our second batch, right? And we saw that the female participation rate has increased. I think the first batch was, let me try to look at the stats. I think the first batch was 30%, and this batch is 38%. And that is exactly 38%. And that to us is a testament of, we have all these females as role models that are speaking out and inspiring and giving the courage and confidence for other female participants to join in. So I think those are some, right? And then if I look at our wider ecosystem, if we look at it from for example, Gojek as a product, right? We have a product that we call a campaign which is called Safe with Gojek Zones, which is a female-friendly space that utilizes hundreds of Gojek shelters and pickup points across Indonesia, and these zones basically have been identified in a UN report, UN Women report titled After Dark. So we're obviously, a lot of our efforts is not only internal for our employees, it looks at our external ecosystem, which is our drivers, merchant partners, and then goes beyond that, which is we look at also the communities that we serve, and with the example of what our Generasi Gigi program has done.
Very interesting, and I like how you also work with KPIs, or you set yourself certain goals and then you try to monitor and measure to what extent you've been able to achieve your goals. I would be curious, you also earlier on talked about the men and the role they have to play in the end. Can you tell us a little bit more how perhaps initially you had to face some opposition, maybe from the male colleagues, and if so, what made them perhaps change their perception, and how did some men even become champions for a more diverse and inclusive approach towards your activities?
Well, I think as a leader, right, and especially, you obviously interact beyond just your own internal ecosystem. I think, like I mentioned before, I am extremely fortunate to be part of an organization which, the majority of the male colleagues are actually extremely supportive of having more female representation. And for them, they really value the different perspective that we actually bring in the table, onto the table. So I think it's very refreshing. But obviously, along the way, as you meet with a lot of parties as well, in which that, I think from personal experience, I've been degraded in public by emphasizing that, oh, you got to where you are, you're sitting here only because of your looks, like
It's terrible.
there are instances like that, right? Or when you're voicing your opinion, it doesn't necessarily get heard. But when it's rephrased by somebody else who's a male counterparts, then suddenly it's a great idea. And so those type of situations are are life situations that has happened, right? But I think the most important thing that I've learned is that never let your emotion get in the way, right? I learned to take it, or when comments are like that are being thrown to me, to brush it off or treat it like a joke, or even yet have a comeback for them, right?
Yeah.
And I should just really realize that, because if I don't do that, then I'm confirming with the norm, right?
Obviously,
So I
sorry.
think, yeah, go ahead. No,
No,
no, no, go ahead.
I was
So
gonna say, Gojek Go-To success in itself, of course, speaks volumes, and I hope would inspire many other organizations to take on a more inclusive approach. We can talk about studies, but I think an organization like Gojek or Go-To, your organization more in general, is an important inspiration for many of us, because on a day-to-day basis, many of us interact with products that you provide to us, services that you provide us with. So if we get these services and products because of a different way in working, I think that in itself is already very important and very inspiring. Maybe turning to another aspect of sustainability, we've talked a lot about diversity and inclusion. The green side, I believe also very important for your organization today, or not today, but this year's theme for International Women's Day is also gender and climate. Can you talk a little bit about how that inspires the way you work and the goals that you set as an organization?
I think for us, right, if we look at it, we take diversity or inclusion, especially we're talking about gender participation, as a must, right? It's not necessarily something that we like to seclude or highlight, but we make that as part of our metrics, right? In talking about participation, it is a given for us. And that, I think, is the approach that we have, make that in Goto as well as in the foundation. So obviously, the environmental side is something that we take extremely seriously. Goto overall have our 3-0 commitment, right? Zero emission, zero waste, and zero barriers. Where zero barriers, it focuses a lot on equality and inclusion. in YBB specifically, we also have our three pillars, right? Our Thrive Forward, which is to develop resilient and agile generation with a bias of towards technology and innovation. We have our Thrive Greener that looks into solving issue pertaining water, waste, circularity, and disaster resilience. And last but not least, we have Thrive Together, which support economies by improving employability and enabling future-ready talent. So if you look at it across from a sustainability as well as our social impact, mission, we both have this commitment towards the environmental piece and looking at waste circularity and trying to get to zero for our organization, in which that specifically for the foundation in Yayasan Anak Bangsa Bisa, we recently launched our program called the Catalyst Changemakers Lab, and within this lab, right, we obviously have amazing women that are part of our ecosystem. For example, we have Dr. Harkunti Pertiwi Rahayu, which is a researcher in ITB, and she is a strong advocate for hydrometeorological disasters, and she basically collaborated with Pittsburgh University and developed the first intervention of the early detection tsunami warning in the Mentawai channel. So we have these type of women who we brought on to inspire other women as well. And so we actually had 33 initially change makers organization that was part of our lab, and with that we came out with 11 solutions that was potentially to be piloted across 3 different cities. And out of that, I think there were I can't remember the statistics, but we actually had 3 that I remember distinctly that was led by women sort of founders, right? So I think that is, to me, also shows that women participation, especially in this field, is really interesting because when we looked at the dynamics, even in the CCL lab, right, between the male and female, it's really, really fascinating to see how it enriches the discussion and how it actually brings in different perspective when we have female representation.
Wonderful. You already have anticipated what would have been my next question, and that is to speak a little bit more on why it is important to apply such a gender lens. And well, you mentioned the aspect of bringing different aspects to the table, different experiences probably as well. Can you perhaps speak a little bit more on how you see that also in a country like Indonesia, men and women are differently impacted by what we think are the initial impacts of climate change also in a country like Indonesia?
I think that is something, to be very honest, we have not necessarily looked into a greater depth, right? But obviously, if we look at it in Indonesia, a lot of the potential we say people that will be impacted by climate change, especially if you look at Indonesia, we're very prone towards hydrometeorological disaster, right? And if we look at that, females are makes probably a larger segment of that group, and hence that they would be mostly impacted. And I think, with that, creating awareness, especially, right, awareness and educating them the impact of climate change that would happen to them, right? They would be amazing advocates to try to what I would say bring multiplier effect in terms of awareness and change, and this obviously we've seen happen in a lot of other countries as well, right? There was one case study that I know that is very, very I would say well known is just in Africa, right? And in how making how they utilize mother. I think the group was called Mother to Mothers, in which that they were using mothers who had or who has been exposed to HIV to educate other mothers, and how that had an amazing stronger multiplier effect, right, in terms of raising awareness. And I think in Indonesia, that is something that we have not necessarily cracked. I know that obviously there's a lot of organization that is trying to utilize the power of women in bringing this awareness. And yeah, I do believe that's where the power of the women would actually lie, especially in trying to address the issue of climate change, right? Is how can we utilize the power of these women to raise awareness and bring this awareness as a as a multiplier effect towards the entire layers of society.
Maybe continuing along that path, we've spoken a lot about what is happening within your organization, but the strength of your organization, the way your organization has developed, means, I believe, that it can also have a major impact well beyond your organization as such, an impact in Indonesian society at large. Indonesia this year is hosting the G20, a very important role, obviously, especially given the current circumstances in the world. Everyone is looking at Indonesia and hoping that it can make this presidency a success. In the specific field of say both gender but also climate, what are your hopes for the G20 presidency to achieve? And is there a way in which your organization also actively tries to support the Indonesian government in making its presidency a success?
Oh, what is the hope? I think if when we're talking about what is the hope, right? I think simply put, I believe that we can do more together, right? Meaning that if we actually involve all the parties, right? Talking about from governments, civil society, even from the public, in all these different sectors, right? What we really need to achieve is, at the end of the day, is this systemic change. And the systemic change obviously can only happen if we have better collaboration, breaking down the silos among all of this, and trying to really I would say galvanizing the young and the voices of the marginalized to actually create the necessary change. Obviously, we often see that between the voices at the bottom, right, the voices of unheard, and the policymaker, for example, there is that gap. So how can we better bridge that gap? And my hope, obviously, with this G20, that we can really take on that value of better collaboration, and really make a bigger impact through this better collaboration. Because I think in looking, and obviously have been speaking to many different organizations as well as government agencies in the past few months, right? It is clearly shown that all of us are starting to adopt the different ways of working. Very open in terms of breaking down the silos, sharing information, and really trying to understand the pain point of what is happening for each different sector, right? Make it from the government, civil society, as well as the public sector, and really trying to address this problem more as one, instead of doing things in silos. I think, yeah, for me, the hope is that, right? Definitely a better collaboration all across, where everybody's voice can actually be heard to really reach to a better systemic change overall. Yeah, and with that, GoTo as a group is definitely supporting as well, in terms of the G20 and Y20. We have our aspiration to be involved, and yeah, so we're really excited, obviously, that Indonesia is hosting this.
Thank you. If I hear you correctly, you are also emphasizing that every segment of society in a way has a role to play. This is such a huge challenge. It's not something that one specific set of actors can solve, and in the end it's the collaboration amongst these different parties and this openness to learn from one another that hopefully will bring us the kind of change, that the systemic change that you're hoping for. As a representative of an embassy, the international community, where do you think the international community can come in? What can we do better to support you in this important endeavor? Can we do more?
I think definitely can do more. I think the role, especially from the international society, is really, really big, especially I think in knowledge exchange, right? I think uh, uh, there's a lot for us to learn, especially in terms of best practices of what has been done, what worked, what did not work, right? That's number one. I think is very important. And with that, obviously adding in local sort of nuances or local cultural nuances obviously is important, but I think knowledge sharing is definitely really, really important. So with that, mentoring is something that I think can be extremely useful to a lot of the sectors in Indonesia. Funding obviously is second. Opening doors towards investments or partnership, that would be probably be areas also that would be extremely important as well. But I do believe that even at the very fundamental level, that learning, right, is really important, because it helps us learn and shorten that, I would say, that learning curve, right, that would naturally would happen. So yeah.
But I think, and I'm sure that's also what you're saying. It should be a two-way street. I think obviously the issues that your organization, Indonesia as a country, is facing, they are not unique to Indonesia. My country is still facing many challenges also when it comes to gender equality. So in that sense, it very much should be an exchange of best practices, experiences, because then I think we can help one another to reach a higher level. So I think the understanding has to be that it goes two ways. In conversations like this, it's also very interesting for me to hear what is happening here, and then to try to take that away and see how that can also perhaps apply for situations in the Netherlands or within my own organization here.
Yeah,
Maybe as a final question, you talked about role models and how it is important, to have role models that are, so to speak, within reach, that make it attainable for a person to really emulate perhaps what the role model is doing, and the kind of inspiration that they provide you with. Who is your role model?
Oh, my role model is actually very simple. It's my mother.
Well, yes, and why?
Very attainable, but she has really shaped me to become who I am today. From her, I learned the power of grit and persistence.
Mm-hmm.
From her, I learned the power of patience. Um, from her, I learned also the power of, you know, never giving up, in the sense that when you're being undermined, when to that point, right, never let your emotion get in the way.
Mm-hmm.
That cool-headedness will actually be able to push you to the next level. So my mother did not my mother was only a high school graduate,
Mm-hmm.
but she along the way learned a lot of different skill, even built her own house, as an learned architecture and so on and so forth. Everything that for her, no was never an answer.
Mm.
Not being able to was never an answer. So, she inspired me in a lot of different way. And then obviously I'm very blessed that she's able to, send me and give me really great education, and hopefully I can be an inspiration for many people as well. But yeah, I learned a lot of those skills, I would say, basic skills, but it's really important, right, to help you build your confidence, to help you believe in who you are, and to make you have that conviction that even you can make a difference.
A beautiful tribute to your mom. I like it. Thank you so much. Thank you very much, Monica, for your contribution to our event on International Women's Day. Much appreciated, very inspiring, and I look forward to continuing the conversation at a later stage in person.
Thank you so much.
Terima kasih banyak.
Yeah, thank you. Bye.